Hearing voices. Hearing voices.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
This is Hearing Voices. Conversations with the voices that bring the excitement of college sports alive.
No headphone can capture the complex bourbon and butter flavor of my actual timber.
Now, here's your host, the voice of your Fighting Tigers, Chris Blair.
Welcome in, Tiger fans. It's another edition of Hearing Voices. Here we are, week number 8 on the LSU football schedule. And we've got a trip headed up to Oxford, Mississippi, one of the longest standing rivalries in the SEC. In fact, for LSU and for Ole Miss, this is the second longest. Both have played Mississippi State more times, but they've been going at it, the Tigers and Rebels, since 1894. On this week's show, it's really a pleasure for me to welcome a guy who is, number one, a great broadcaster, and that's who we have on here, the college voices that bring the action alive, but he's also one of the coolest dudes, nicest guys you'll ever meet. He truly is a good guy, and he's been awfully nice to me since I got here to LSU, and that says a lot when you consider Ole Miss and LSU. There is a lot of respect, but sometimes no love lost. But welcome into the show, a longtime voice of the Ole Miss Rebels and our good friend, David Kellum. Kellum, how are you? I know this is a week where everybody's supposed to be fired up. Ole Miss is ready to get after LSU, and the Tigers are ready to get up there to the Grove and get after the Rebels.
No doubt, Chris. Appreciate the kind words. Apparently you want a lunch somewhere. You know how those radio guys are. We just share lunches here and there. But, yeah, it should be an incredible matchup. We were talking before we started this, and I just wrapped up watching the LSU win over Florida, which was incredible, and the Tigers played really, really well. We've played really good, especially on the offensive side of the ball. So it should be a heck of a game Saturday.
No doubt about it. I mean, it typically is. And, you know, I did the same thing on Sunday, actually. I saw the very end of Ole Miss's game last week in Knoxville, which, again, the game in and of itself was a great game. There was more after the fact that probably got the headlines. But for you, you know, I think about myself and those maybe out there listening. I mean, you're going through the mechanics of calling the game. It's an exciting game, going down to the wire, a must-win for really both teams. And then suddenly the game ends, and then there's all kinds of stuff. Were you guys in a break? Were you still on the air? Did you notice what was going on as Coach Kiffin was trying to just get to the locker room and get with his team?
Well, you know, it was really crazy, Chris, because we became, you know, we're really sportscasters, but when something like that takes place, you become newsmen. I mean, that's really what we're reporting what we're seeing happen, and moving from sports play-by-play. We're moving from bottles flying through the air, play-by-play. So it was strange. We're still on the air. We stayed with it. I thought Richard Cross, our sidelines guy, did a wonderful job of kind of describing what was happening there. Even talk about good radio. We caught Richard several times on the sidelines yelling, "Look out, look out," as bottles were flying. And, you know, it was a sad deal, too, to be honest with you, though, because Tennessee had great atmosphere, nothing against 90% of the fans. I mean, it was wonderful. For 59 minutes, it was as good as it gets. I thought their game day experience was perfect. It was a packed house, but then, you know, they were just mad. They came intentionally to boo Lane, and then they started booing the officials, and they started booing players who they thought were faking injuries. And, I mean, it just got to be crazy. And so I think they just got the point for those students over there. They'd had enough and started throwing bottles. It was a costly fine, though, for sure. But it was a strange finish to a game.
David Kellum, our guest this week, voice of the Ole Miss Rebels. Yes, they were fined. I was happy to see that the SEC did that. You know, and sometimes I think we forget. You know, it's always exciting. We've all been a part of a game where, you know, the team either has a big upset or it's just a huge victory and they want to storm the field. And, of course, everybody poo-poos the fact that they don't want you on the field. But there are legitimate reasons why. I know Coach Saban earlier this week in his press conference showed some of the damage he took when A&M stormed the field after their big win over Alabama a couple of weeks ago. And then, you know, case in point, you watch what happens. Obviously, there's a lot of emotion running high when Lane Kiffin returns to Tennessee. But those are the reasons that, you know, they have these rules in place, because it can become extremely dangerous. And goodness knows, knock on wood, hope that it never gets any worse than Lane catching a bottle and catching a golf ball. And your good sideline reporter, Richard Cross, hope he came out unscathed as well.
He did. He came out unscathed. But, all of our fan bases will do some things that are crazy. We may have been when we were fans, do some things you regret or whatever. But it's so important not to throw items, period. I used to be the PA announcer at Ole Miss for years, and we had a whiskey bottle fly out of the stands and a basketball at the time, and he got on the PA and lambasted everybody. But it's just scary. I know it sounds like it might be innocent. It's just a water bottle or whatever that may be throwing. But hopefully we'll all learn a lesson in the league to try to stay away from that.
All right, we're talking with David Kellum, and again, he's been through a lot, seen some great moments there at Ole Miss. We expect a really good game coming up this weekend at Vaught-Hemingway Stadium between LSU and Ole Miss. You've had a chance, obviously, David, to work with head coach Ed Orgeron, his time as the head coach there at Ole Miss. I know you've told me before he was. You guys had a great relationship. Lane Kiffin there now. I'm not comparing the two. They're not the same individual, but they can be exciting and fun to work around. Your relationship with Lane Kiffin, how does that work? And overall, how do you try to manage the relationship you have with not just the football coach, but all the coaches that you work with, and even coaches of teams that you don't necessarily cover, but that you work with on a day-to-day basis?
That's a really good question because they're different. We've had so many different coaches. In my run through Ole Miss, there's only been one football coach that left on his own accord. That was Tommy Tuberville. And, of course, people were mad that he left Ole Miss and went to Auburn. But the rest of them have been exited in one form or fashion. It's just kind of the nature of the beast, so to speak. So, you build a relationship with somebody and they may not be here very long. You try to maintain those relationships. And I've done a pretty good job with that through the years and all. With Lane specifically, when Lane first got here, it took us a little while to build that relationship, but I think it's good now. He understands what we do, and it's I think the coaches show that he does weekly is just hilarious. He's been really entertaining in it, and he's very transparent, tells it like it is, gives his thoughts out there. He's sort of like a lightning rod, as you see. The national exposure that he gets is phenomenal, and I think it's just because of the different places he's been and different things that have occurred around his career and all. But the bottom line is he's an incredible coach, tremendous offensive mind. He's got some really good coaches on the staff as well, and he's kind of letting them do their thing too. But he's been fun. Lane's been really fun to work with. And kind of talking about Ed, too, when Ed was at Ole Miss, I felt like maybe not totally ready to be a head coach at that point, and he's even said that publicly himself. But it was really good to us, and had a good experience. I was so happy to see his career mature and become better. And, regardless of what you think of recent years with LSU since the national championship, Ed Orgeron is going to be beloved, I think, by Tiger fans forever. He's got a national championship in his hip pocket. Nobody's going to take that away from him, and awfully proud of him. When he was at our place, Chris, the kids were young. They'd come to the coach's show, jump up in his lap and all, and now, they're a lot older and everything, but you do reflect back on those relationships, and you just try to build them and let those coaches know that, hey, I'm on your team, got your back. Those of us that work for the schools, that's pretty much the way it is. We're not pro announcers trying to criticize everything that we see. Not that we don't have an opinion too, but building those relationships are really important. I've
said it on this show many times, David, to your point, that I try to tell fans that my job is more like P.T. Barnum than Edward R. Murrow, as
right,
far as
exactly.
Promoting the coaches, the programs, the student athletes, and the department. I mean, there are many great professionals out there in the media, as you know, here in Baton Rouge and as well as in Oxford and all across Mississippi. Their job is to be, critical of the program or point things out to the program, break news, if you will. That's just never what I thought our role is. No. And we've all been through those great years. Obviously, 2019, I've never had a season like that. Was great to be along for the ride. we've also had, seasons like last year and the start of this year. But I think our role, again, there's always going to be a fan base that every Saturday, as much as they didn't like last week's loss, it's going to be, hope springs eternal, that this is the Saturday that things go right. And I think that's who, as far as a fan base that we're trying to tap into, which is different than traditional media, let's face it.
Yeah, no doubt. No question at all. In fact, Warner Alford years ago was the athletic director here when I got hired. And he called me in. Warner basically raised me in here in the Oxford area. But he called me in and he said, David, I want you to know something. You're not the star. The stars are the players and the coaches. And he said, give the score a lot. so I said, okay, I get that part. And then Warner wanted me to name the lineman because he was a former lineman. And so I got an additional spotter to help me set the offensive line more regularly than some others do. But it stuck with me to realize that, you're an extension of us. Our players and coaches are stars. That's what the athletic departments are supposed to do, is to build them up and put them in their best possible position, if you will. And so I've always kind of done that. And the other thing for me, I'm a graduate of the University of Mississippi, so I got a diploma on the wall that gives me a license to be for my team, which is good too. So our fan base knows, my background, where it comes from. So if you want to hear the quote Ole Miss version, you listen to David Kellum. You'll hear the LSU version, listen to Chris Blair. And so I think we're the two things that are most important for us as radio announcers is to make that person listening feel like they're there, if they're not there, listening to us in the stands and all, and be very, very descriptive, but also give them what they want to hear about the schools that we cover.
Yeah, I agree. And for those, I got to invite you because I say this every week because all of these guys are I'm fans of. And, whenever Ole Miss is playing in football, basketball, or baseball, and I'm either on the road or we're coming back and I can get, a live stream on my phone or mobile device, I always tune in to David and his crew because, David, this is a compliment. You guys, when you listen, I think, it's easy for me to tell how the day's been going. There's a certain tone. There's a certain pace. You give the information. You're not overly critical, but you also say, hey, the reason we're losing is we haven't been able to run the ball. We've got 23 yards rushing or whatever the case may be. And I really believe that's why you're so endeared and beloved by Ole Miss fans, is that you do tell them what's happening, good or bad. You just don't have to, kick a horse on the ground time and time again. And I think you do an excellent job. Number one, of describing the action, but also kind of allowing fans to either celebrate with you when things are going well for the Rebs or kind of commiserate when things are not going well. And to me, that's where the place is for each team's radio. I believe that in pro sports, although it's not always true. But in college, I think that's why there's still an attraction, and while radio still matters, is fans want to hear the guy, who's feeling great like they are or feeling bummed out because they are.
Yeah, that's a great point, and not necessarily sugarcoating it, because then you don't have any, credibility. You've got to tell it like it is. And I think back to the Alabama game we played here recently, and we were just getting beat up in the trenches. I mean, we really were. We were losing the battle of the trenches on both sides there for a while in that game, and we said that. I said that. Former player is my color analyst, Harry Harrison, who said that too. Richard Cross on the sidelines said that, and it was pretty obvious. I was really glad that the coach said that in the postgame show too, because you want to be on the same page with your coaches. But I think you really do have to describe what you're seeing and let them know that hey, here's why we are doing poorly, here's why we are doing well, and still you can have that level of excitement on scores and what have you. I've always thought that it wasn't a golf match. Sports are for the excitement, especially with your own fan base. They want to celebrate just like you want to celebrate, and so we're sort of a conduit for that.
I was going to ask you because have you ever heard from anybody over the years doing a game that was from maybe not even the other team's fan base that happened to land on it, and maybe you were the only source to provide them the information, or maybe just just somebody who loves college sports tunes into a game? Have you ever heard from anybody who says, you call it too much one way, or, hey, you did a pretty good job of giving credit where credit's due, no matter who the team was?
That's a really good question, because I think in the good old days when I was a younger announcer, I was so pro Ole Miss, trying to make the Ole Miss fans just as happy as I could, and I still do that. I mean, I always want to beat the opponent, including the LSU Tigers this weekend. But I think with satellite radio and the different ways you can now listen to us as a group, and like you said, I do the same thing. I listen to the other announcers as well, get some great tips. Back in the early days, I didn't get really a chance to listen to what other folks were doing, except those people in my immediate area through radio and all. But as that audience has grown, I think I've become better at giving the opponent credit, if you will. Especially, it's real easy in our league because we got some phenomenal players, and so you just talk about how good, this kid from Auburn is, this kid from LSU is, this guy over here is incredible. I did women's basketball for 10 years early in my career, and there were some just incredible players that came through that stretch too. But I do believe that we tend to feed a much bigger audience, and I have heard from some of them, gotten some positive comments about how we as a group do the games. I think most listeners are smart enough to know that if you tune into the radio broadcast of Ole Miss, they're going to be pro Ole Miss. But I'd like for them to be telling it so I can understand what's going on. Especially if you don't have a dog in a fight, so to speak, you'd like to get the best description of the game too. And so that's an interesting new balance, I think, these days.
Yeah, my late father, I mean, some of the advice he gave me, he always said, if you're getting paid by the school or you're representing the school, whatever it may be, you need to be pro, that team. And I learned that at an early age. He said, but don't forget there's going to be other people who stumble upon you back in the day by turning the dial, now by pushing scan or looking on your phone. And he said, just always be aware that there's somebody out there that probably could be wanting some company on a long drive and wants a decent game. May not be an LSU fan, may not be an Ole Miss fan, but hey, it's 10-7 in the third quarter. I'm going to listen to this thing out. And he said, if you're going to sit there and run down the referees and you're going to run down the other team, and he said, just always remember there's a certain group of your fan base that loves that stuff. They want you to run down the refs and they want you to run down the other team. But there's always another group that just wants to hear a quality broadcast. So I think you and I are.
Interesting, Chris. I've even talked to opposing fan base some through the broadcast, because there was a time there, especially on Sirius Radio, they took the home broadcast only.
Right.
So if you were an LSU fan, for example, this weekend, and you went to satellite radio, the only version you got was the Ole Miss version. And so I became a little bit more sensitive to that, and even to the extent that, I'm the Ole Miss announcer, but hey, you people at LSU, y'all got to love this guy you got. He's been super, something to that extent. I've done a few times here and there, but still the ultimate goal is to, get the Ole Miss message to the Ole Miss fans.
I got, it was a tough night in Pasadena to open the season. UCLA dominated that game, and much like you were describing earlier, I mean, what else can we say? I mean, they were just running it right at LSU. There was nothing the Tigers could do to stop them. A couple days later, I got an email from a UCLA fan who was in Hawaii, and for whatever reason, the television was blocked out. He couldn't watch the game. I don't know why he couldn't find the Bruins broadcast, but he said, I found you guys online and prepared myself for what would be just, over-the-top LSU. UCLA has no business playing. And he said, I wanted to give your crew compliments that we actually thought you did, all of you, with Doug and Gordy, did an excellent job of just describing the story. It was easy to tell that you weren't happy the way things were going. But the reason it wasn't going well was because UCLA was playing well. So
right, and sometimes our own fan bases don't want to hear that, and you guys do a great job. I listen to you guys all the time too, but sometimes our fan base wants it to be our fault, we didn't do so. But I think it's what we fail. We're all trying to win the national championship, but there's only going to be one.
That's
the rest
right.
of us are not going to make it, so to speak. And not that you don't want to strive for that, as an athletic department, as in a school, and as radio announcers too, but I think that especially these days, with all the different people that may be in your audience, it's important to give the opponent the credit when it's due.
David Kellum, our guest, voice of the Ole Miss Rebels. He'll be on the call with his team coming up on Saturday. Again, kickoff at 2:39 Central Time there from Vaught-Hemingway Stadium. Before we went on on today's show, I'm mathematically challenged. I've made no bones about that. That's pretty obvious. But I was trying to figure out if David Kellum is now the dean of SEC announcers. Now, there's two ways to look at it. This is his 43rd year calling action for Ole Miss. Started with baseball, eventually picked up all three in 1989. But what's interesting is when you take David's career representing the Rebels, he is the dean. There's nobody has done it longer currently in the SEC. But three pretty good announcers, one of which, David, I talked to last week, all kind of got their introduction to their school's football program in 1989. What a year for this league when it comes to radio.
Well, Mick Hubert at Florida and Eli Gold at Alabama started at the same time. Is really interesting. I went in a year before Wes Durham. Wes went to Vanderbilt. Of course, he's with Fox now, does a great job. And we were the youngest two announcers in the league, and it was pretty intimidating. In fact, we even communicated that to each other. But you had Larry Munson at Georgia, and John Ward was at Tennessee. If you watched the show about the voices, you got to see and hear how they were. Jim Fife, Jack Crystal. Fife was at Auburn. Crystal, was at State. Jim Hawthorne at LSU. It just goes on and on and on. And all those guys were really, really good to me personally. Gave me some great tips, and it seems to me like it was yesterday. Now I'm that guy. I'm one of the guys that's been here forever. But I get everybody. I started at 18 years old, so I just eased into the 60s here recently. So I consider myself relatively young, is why I've got so many years built up. But it has been an incredible ride. I've enjoyed not only my experience at Ole Miss, but the experience that I've received at all the other SEC schools. I'm kind of excited about Oklahoma and Texas coming in, be some more places to go travel to and visit down the road as well. But it's been an incredible ride with some really, really talented people in the SEC.
You know, David, the reason I bring that up was not to date you, because, again, as I told you before we got started, you don't look a day over 45. So whatever you're doing, keep it up. But I asked that because I wanted to ask you about this. One of the things that I get fans ask me a lot, friends of mine, family members say, you're doing football, basketball, and baseball. So that's basically August, into August, until, with our two programs, a possibility of late June. And then you get kind of the teacher's summer, maybe a month and a half. Do you miss out on all kinds of family things? Like, how do you do that? You miss, dances, you miss baseball games, you miss school functions, you miss things that your wife is up to and should be and is important to you. For you, I know now you've got grown kids and you've kind of been able to get to see your lovely wife most of the time when we play up there in Oxford, because a lot of the time she's able to go with you, at least for the home games. But what was it like, again, starting so young at 18 years old, and then you go from baseball right into football and basketball, and then you're, as we say, you're gone most of the year, or have to travel most of the year. You're certainly busy most of the year.
Yeah, most years, and I'm speaking to the choir when I'm talking to you about it, but we'll get an open date in football, maybe get lucky and get two. You get the Christmas break, basically, and then every single other weekend over a 10-month period, you're either at home doing a game or you're on the road doing a game, and you're not at your house for Saturday, Sunday, so to speak. And it is stressful on families, and a lot of announcers have had difficulties with that. It's been too tough on family life. I'm fortunate because my wife's a high school sweetheart. We've known each other forever. She's a sports fan, and she knew what I was doing and basically raised my two daughters through most of that. But I went through a tough time with it too, Chris, with just guilt, feelings of, gosh, I need to go see Stephanie do this, I need to go see Stacy do that, and you just missed a lot of those opportunities. It's funny you bring it up because we were having a family gathering. Now they're both grown and we were talking about that, and both my daughters said, you saw us plenty enough. So my guilt there maybe was too much. They both said that they got to see me plenty, or maybe they didn't want to see me as much, whatever the case may be. But they both, we tried to make it intentional to travel them as much as they can and wanted to. But it is difficult. It's a tough assignment, especially when you're doing all three sports. I mean, you and I do football and basketball, and then when you hit baseball, there's your real grind. I mean, not that football and basketball overlap's not tough, but the basketball-baseball overlap is just crazy. And so there's two things. You got to really love what you do, which I do, and you've got to work those times and spend as much time with your family as you can. I eliminated a lot of extracurricular things that I like to do, hunting and golf, et cetera, just so I could spend more time with the family through the years. We're in a good period now, though, because like you said, my kids are grown. Mary can travel anytime she wants to, pretty much with me. And so that's been really, really solid. But it is a grind. I get tickled at the coaches who say, "Oh, we're just in this grind." I said, "You don't want my grind because it's not just your sport; it's two other sports, you know." But we love what we do, but it can be stressful on family life.
No doubt about it. Here's another similarity. My wife and I, high school sweethearts, and again, she knew what I wanted to do, and she's kind of had to deal with it. Maybe not to this degree, but she's had to deal with it basically ever since she's known me. So I think that does help. I think that helps in a big way. And I'm pretty sure if you ask my kids, age 16 and 9, right now, they would tell you, yeah, we see Dad enough. We see Dad too much. So I don't think that changes whether they're still young or whether they're grown. I think from their perspective, at least hopefully, they feel like we've been able to spend the proper time. A couple of minutes left with David Kellum, who's been nice enough to give his time this week on Hearing Voices. And David, I noticed there, for those who are listening, they can't see this, but you're in your home office, and boy, you seem to have a couple of relics there behind you. Is that compact disc behind you, and is that it's hard to see, is that a record up there in the cabinet, or what am I seeing behind you?
What you see, the record here is the Ballad of Archie Who, the original 45. Wow. We have since then digitized that. We have it on hard drive, but that's what that is. So these are CDs. I've still got a tremendous music collection. That's some CDs that I've actually made myself. As you see, there's not very many missing. I'm in the hard drive world like everybody else. Oh, David DeLucci from Baton Rouge is right up here. That's a former baseball player for the Rebels. But yeah, I've got an office full of junk, I guess you could say. David's not junk, but David DeLucci playing pro ball, and Keith Carter when we won at Kentucky in Lexington up here celebrating. I pick at him on this picture. He's got his arms up in the air and celebrating and pointing at the fans as he's walking off the floor. He's our athletic director now. And I said, you were kind of like Marshall Henderson that night. He said, I don't look at it that way. But he had a little Marshall in him on that particular game. But, we do collect a lot of difference. I don't know if Mary can sell all this when I'm dead and gone or not, but I'm sure she'll surely try.
I imagine there's going to be plenty of fans that would be interested. So is that music? I mean, I got to ask before we go, what are we looking at? I have I tell people all the time, if you looked at my music collection, which I must admit, I still have massive amounts. In fact, boxes in storage with compact discs. But if you were to pull it all out, you would think either A, there's 8 different people's collection here, or Chris has multiple personalities. Give us a sample. What's there behind you? What if we threw something in? What would we hear?
100% the same. And the reason is I started my career as a disc jockey. Mm-hmm. So I DJ country music, DJ top 40 music, DJ rock music. And when you do that, you kind of get into a whole bunch of different genres. You had the disco era when I was DJing back in the day. So I've got a little bit of everything. 2 rows of albums upstairs. In fact, I get so tickled. Some of the younger guys at our office will say, "Hey, DK, you got any vinyl?" I say, "Oh yeah, I got tons of vinyl." So well, bring me some vinyl. And so the albums have come back. Back in the day when we were playing those as disc jockeys, you'd get what would be a cue burn as you queued up the album. So when you hit it, it would start at the beginning of the song. And so we were elated when albums in 45s went away because the audio was better. But now they're popular again. Everybody wants but I do need to look up the prices of them before I just give them away to some of these youngsters up at the office.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I was lucky because my dad had moved and bought and sold some radio stations, and you get the radio version, which was kind of a demo version. It's the same album, it just wasn't sold, and they would stamp it so that DJs, believe it or not, might try to sell them. But that's what I have. So
but we
I
can
have,
sell them now.
Yes, you
right?
can now. I think you're good. But, yeah, I mean, that's what I have. And, in fact, when I do my charts during the week, my spotting charts for football, in fact, yesterday I was working on Ole Miss's, I throw my record player on and throw one of the, 33s on there, and that's kind of what I do. And I've got everything digitized, too, but I like the snap, crackle, and pop. Of a record.
Me too.
So, yeah, the kids, it's coming back.
There that's different, too. We could talk about music all day, by the way. But I've digitized some of my albums. And you take an album and you record it to CD or record it to hard drive, it has sort of the album quality.
Yeah.
It sounds better to me because we go that far. I've got what is this, Otari, a Sansui receiver over here that I got when I was a kid in 1972. That I'm still using, works like a champ. I just jinxed it, but yeah, I'm a music person too. But it was good old, early radio. My era, Chris, a little bit before you. That was it. There were no podcasts and no iPads, no phones. It was radio, and it was fun. I worked here in the local market, and the phone would just absolutely ring off the wall for requests. I was Diamond Dave on the Top 40 station.
I love it.
Dave Dallas on the country station. And when I did the nighttime rock, I was David K. And you had to change. It was like theater. You had to change, Like we were real upbeat on the Top 40, say, hey, what you want to hear? Da, da, da. We went to the country station, hey, what's going on, folks? And then on the rock station, it was like laid back 60s drug heads. We were all right, welcome to 98 Rock. What you want to hear tonight? I mean, so we literally changed personalities. It was fun radio.
Yeah, the rock station, that's where you put the 9.5-minute song or the 8.5-minute Stairway to Heaven and go take a break, do whatever it is that you do. David Kellum is our guest, and you're right. We could sit here. Maybe we should do another podcast at the end of baseball season when we're both done, and we'll just talk about music and we'll talk about old radio because I literally I grew up in it, and I love it.
We can compare collections. Might even trade some music. Huh,
there we go. Hey, you know what? And a new album, if you go buy a new album now, they're wanting $30 and $40.
Yeah,
so I can only
imagine
what your vintage stuff. I mean, you if you're looking to, go on a nice vacation, take the missus somewhere overseas, then, you might want to give up some of that vinyl. It's worth a lot of money. Worth a lot more than it used to be.
No doubt.
All right, so fans get mad if I don't talk football, and I just got one final question for you.
Yeah.
And I was thinking earlier this morning, what should I ask David about? Because I'm only going to ask one question about the matchup Saturday. Coming into the season, a lot of expectations for Lane Kiffin, basically because last year their offense was incredible. You expect it to continue, but the defense has got to get better. So the easy question for you is, now that you have basically half the season under your belt, is this defense better, and why is it better than a year ago?
I think it is. There's been moments where we felt like, we've gone back to the way it was a year ago, can't get a stop, but everybody's struggling defensively to get stops with these high-powered, high-paced offenses and all. But I do believe we're better. At the tail end of last season, I thought we got stronger. We played a really good defense in a bowl game. But there's been times I thought we just weren't going to stop Arkansas, but they couldn't stop us either, and it just became a crazy shootout. And I think the fatigue gets in on the defense too. But I do believe we are better defensively than we were a year ago. Is there room for improvement? Absolutely. And just kind of as an add-on, offensively, it may be one of the best offenses I've been around. Now, Matt played an incredible game last week. I do think he's Heisman-type quarterback. Be in the NFL a long, long time, but he pretty much put that game on his shoulders last week. He was lost his top two receivers, and still did a great job, ran the ball a lot. So we feel good about scoring, but you got to get the stops. You just feel like you don't want to go into a game where you feel like you have to score every single time, and we've kind of been in that mode the last 2 years, but we're getting a few more stops, and hopefully we can slow the Tigers down. That was a great game LSU played this past weekend and found the running game too, and we haven't just been super great against the run. But it should be a heck of a matchup.
I think it is going to be a great matchup, which is why I believe CBS decided of all the games going on, this was the one that probably would get more eyeballs because I think it's going to be one heck of a battle. And that question actually beat out the question I was going to ask, which is Matt Corral injured? Is he going to play? But I'm not going to ask that because I don't know.
I know there's been some talk around that. I'm going to be stunned if Matt Corral's not in the game this weekend.
I am too. So I think you and I are on the same wavelength there. David Kellum, I'm telling you, you're a treasure. I love that we have a friendship, but I listen to you on a regular basis and steal what I can when I get the opportunity. Thanks for taking time out of your busy week, and look forward to seeing you there at the stadium on Saturday afternoon.
Well, likewise, Chris, appreciate you. And I know when you got the LSU job, I was so proud for you because I knew your background and how good you were, and they made a huge and wonderful decision to bring you there. I've got a daughter who's an LSU grad, so you can have her whenever you want her.
Right. She's not gonna be at the game Saturday though, right?
No, not gonna make the game, but she'll be cheering against me from her house, I promise you.
So she'll be wearing purple and gold.
No doubt.
I got you. All right, Dave, have a great call. I know you will, and we'll see you Saturday afternoon there up in Oxford.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, everybody. David Kellum, great to have him on the show. Voice of the Rebels. He'll have the call with his team coming up Saturday when LSU and Ole Miss get together from Vaught-Hemingway Stadium. Kickoff at 2:39 Central Time. Thanks to David. Thanks to you for coming by and visiting our show. Once again, don't forget, if you subscribe, every time we do a new one, it's going to drop right there in your favorite mobile device. So do that. And maybe even like it. Give us a thumbs up, whatever it is that they ask you to do. I certainly won't mind. It would go a long way. It would please me, and it would please my bosses. So thanks in advance. We'll be back next week. I know the Tigers are off, but we got a special guest joining us on Hearing Voices. Sometimes we dip into the TV side of things, so be looking for that next week. Until then, this is Chris Blair, still Hearing Voices.
Hearing Voices is a production of LSU-SP and Playfly Sports. Hit the subscribe button now and never miss a new episode. You can follow Chris at LSU Tigers Voice. The LSU Sports Radio Network, a division of LSU-SP and Playfly Sports.